Hello all, hope you're doing well today. So in my little corner of England we have some issues with water supply. We wake up early in the morning and no taps are running. Now it may just be one of those things, I'm sure it will be solved in due course, no need to worry and the rest of it. But it does wake you up to what's going on in modern Britain. Like I say, it could just be one of those things. But given the frame that I understand modern Britain, and I dare say you do too, it feels like these things are going to get more and more common. And that wakes you up to the reality of the situation we're living in. We've been blessed, really, in the West. Our ancestors created an incredible infrastructure that if I'm really honest, I don't think we respect enough. We should really get down on our knees and pray once a day in thanks for what's been created, how easy our modern lives are, thanks to the incredible genius of our ancestors. But as I say, when these things falter, as they tend to in the modern era in various ways, and I think they will do more and more, it does wake you up to how reliant we are on these systems around us that really are far beyond us. And again, you don't think about this in the day-to-day until something goes wrong. And then, of course, you start to realise what's truly around you. The first thing you often notice is the labyrinthian bureaucracy. Now, I cannot bear bureaucracy. If I'm anything, it's anti-bureaucracy. And whenever you try and figure out what's happened, you will just get, waiting on some line with some middle-of-the-road music, take that type stuff. I'm trying to hold on. I think this is just driving me mad. I can't take another minute of this. I end up hanging up. But anyway, the point is you wait on for these things for half an hour if you can bear it, and then you get through to, someone in India who puts you on to someone else, and on it goes. And you never really figure out what's gone on anyway. And again, all of this stuff is supposed to make life easier for you, but if I'm honest, it drives me mad, so I try and just stay away from it. But again, this speaks to something of the modern era. When things fall apart, you realise everything around us is structured in this deeply labyrinthian manner, which we don't really have any understanding of at all. Not to mention, another thing I noticed which was quite interesting was obviously I had to go out early in the morning. Absolutely lovely, actually. Sun was coming up and all that sort of stuff. And this time of year, beautiful when you get those crisp mornings. And England really is a beautiful country when the sun's out. Even my wife thinks when the sun's not out, actually, you get those moody skies. I do see what she means, but I prefer the sun personally. Anyway, the point is I was out there looking for some water first thing in the morning. And one thing I noticed was the same energy that we had around COVID, where you have this selection of people who are just ramming shops full, and they have baskets and trolleys full of water. And you're thinking, look, this will probably be sorted by the end of the day, but more importantly, where is our consideration for our fellow people, for the people who live in the same community as us? Now maybe I could be wrong, they might be buying water for, all of their block, maybe, but I don't think that is the case for some people. Again, I saw it during COVID when people were buying toilet paper, and they're probably still using that toilet paper now they bought so much, but I thought it was so rude, people then go to the shop and there's nothing for anybody else. And I thought this really, again, it sums up our modern mentality, the rampant individualism and materialism of the age. And in a sense, people have been trained this way, or perhaps they've been de-civilized, if you will. But it made me think, again, you take away the smooth functioning of the system, and something that's revealed is quite ugly. I remember a teaching from some Christian monk years ago, which always stuck with me, which was, your morality doesn't count in the day-to-day. Your morality is judged by what happens when there's a riot, And if then you're not rioting and kicking things over and stealing people's livelihoods, then you can say you're acting morally. But if you're just doing it in the day-to-day, you don't really know. You might just be acting that way, basically because of social expectation. And again, this speaks to something that I think we've lost as well. This idea of, your own integrity to your own heart, not just the social order, but the higher order, which the social order should truly feed off, creates the high trust society. And I think there are various ingredients to a high trust society, the homogenous community and so on. And again, on top of that, the alive tradition. And I think that creates, if you will, the wonderful environments that made true England, deep England, such a peaceful and harmonious place to live. I think that's going. I think many of us can see that that's going. Now, I don't think everybody needs to be, high on all this spirituality like someone like me, but I do believe you need a vanguard of people who are deeply committed to that path and, if you like, pass on those truths into the broader society. But anyway, the real point I want to get to here is infrastructural collapse, which, is something I don't speak about that often, but it is another dimension of what we're experiencing. I speak a lot about cultural collapse, civilizational collapse, spiritual collapse, but really infrastructural collapse is just a reflection of that, And I think we all know as well, when we look at what's happened in countries like modern Britain, and as I said yesterday, it's not just Britain. This is happening across the West. There are too many people here. Probably 10 to 15 million too many. I remember reading a while ago that I think after accepting around 10 million people, we haven't built one new reservoir. So what do we think is going to happen? Many of our sewer systems are built in the Victorian times. They are not built for this many people. It's going to start to lead to major problems, and we don't have the money to fix these systems either, which are complex and they're difficult to solve, and it's ugly work. You need real disciplined men to do that sort of work, and again, it's difficult to find them in this day and age, and they're not respected when they do this work. So again, we can see the systems are becoming overburdened. By the way, when I say the systems are becoming overburdened because we've got 10, 15 million extra, that's not including the illegals. So we don't know how many illegals are here. The estimates are anything from 1 million to 5 million. Take your guess. I personally think it's around 2, 3 million, but I could be wrong. Another factor that we don't speak about is, I give boomers a hard time on this channel. At least I do, liberal boomers. I know there are good boomers out there, and many of them reach out to me, so I know there are good boomers and so on. But one thing that's great about the boomers across the board is they did tend to work quite hard, and they did have an expertise, and they did see our systems go from legacy systems to digital systems. And what that means is they had a wealth of knowledge and experience. We're talking 40, 50, sometimes 60 years worth of working experience in a given industry. Now, when everything goes tits up and, whatever, the digital machines don't work, they've got the analog experience. They were in that world for 20 years. They're calm. They know how to handle it. They've seen it all before. They've left the workplace now. They've retired. They've gone off to live in an all-white enclave down in Cornwall or Devon or whatever. And who have they been replaced by? Cynical Gen Xers, millennials who, have been trained to think with their feelings rather than anything else. Inexperienced Zoomers, And of course, on top of that, the machines, which again, if they go doolally, well, what are you going to do? Because that feeds you back into the bureaucracy. You have to ring India or San Francisco or wherever else, China. And then you've got the migrants and the DEI thing. And all of this is a bad recipe. It's a bad recipe. It's almost like, all right, today's a minor thing. These things happen, I get it. But what about if 3 or 4 things like that happen at once? What happens then? And how far away are we from something like that happening? That leads us to the sort of South Africa state. There are people who reach out to me saying, look, we're on that path now. It's hard to disagree with them. It seems to me there's some very harsh realizations with regards to the standard of living we have and how it's held together. And that bubble is going to burst. And I think it's quite evident now that the life that is wonderful that we have in the modern West, in many ways, is starting to fall away, and it's getting harder and harder to be on the top of that mountain. And all of us, I think, are starting to realise that globalism is feasting on the corpse of what was once Britain, of what was once Europe. We're seeing it all over the place. And that globalism, that vicious energy, will move on to a new host once it's gutted out Britain and the rest of Europe, and arguably the Western world, And we need something beyond the neutrality of the viciousness of the market and the modern leftist liberal ideology. There has to be something else which comes in its place to really give us some solid foundations to stand upon. If we don't have that, you will see the arguments of the left will start to get more prominence. I saw a video from Novara Media. They're a leftist outlet. I'm sure you know them. It's the Ash Sakar one. She's the one that yelled at Piers Morgan about how she's a communist. But in this video, they were saying, look, what is happening in modern Britain is they're trying to create a migrant class like Dubai who will just work for them. Now, obviously, the Novara Media are taking the angle of the poor old migrant. And in many senses, I can have some sympathy with that. There is no doubt that some migrants are brought over here, paid a pittance, and are basically a slave class for the international elite, who, by the way, aren't white. That's another thing that you have to remember. Go and have a look in Mayfair in this day and age. If you're ever in London, have a walk around. You'll see it's Arab now. Again, no one talks about this, but it's true. I've been there myself and seen it. Now, the other thing to mention with this is, yeah, I can sympathise with the migrants to an extent, but they're doing it to all of us. We're all being made that underclass, to basically maintain the standard of living for an increasingly small elite. And that just isn't going to balance for the long run. So the point here is that if we don't have almost a deeper understanding of what's going on, those leftist arguments will come in again, and it will just lead to the same problem. So in essence, it is moving a bit away from the kind of pure economics ideology paradigm we have today to more of a civilizational dynamic. I think that really is the key for the future. And if we don't understand that, it will be the South Africanization of the West. Now, this is long-term stuff. None of this is going to be solved tomorrow. Like I always say, we need to almost have a sort of collapse so we come to our senses. Like I say, all the ideology in the world is nothing when you go through real pain, because pain courses through any of our beliefs and makes you acknowledge what's true. And that's what's now coming for the West. It's what you see online all the time, every day. Everybody's right about everything. And if you don't agree, you're a retard. And you think this is symbolic of the state we're in the modern West. We're kind of all over the place. There's no central alignment through which we could riff off, again, because the central sacred structure, the traditional structure, has fallen apart, and then what follows on is the results in the physical world as well. But as always, I don't like to just end things by being negative and saying, well, everything's screwed. There is always a way through things. There is always opportunity for spiritual evolution, for learning, for redevelopments of the civilization, no matter the situation. But personally, I think maybe the first thing that I'm thinking of today, and I think many of us are already going down this road, is about becoming more self-reliant. Because I do think Britain is getting harder and harder to trust, it's getting harder to live in, and to be honest, I do think it's a matter of time before we're seeing basically more failure in infrastructure. So what I'm thinking about here is allotment space. I think things like this are going to be increasingly valuable in the future, where you can grow your own food, where you're not reliant on a supply chain which is liable to falter. Water filtration. We get lots of rain here. These things aren't impossible to figure out. Have all sorts of systems. I'm quite interested in getting out and about and spending a few nights in woods and things like that. Well, you get all sorts of water filtration systems you can buy online. All you do is hang them up and it just filters the water naturally. All you need is a more advanced system than that. But the big thing, the real key to my mind, is communities. This is going to be the big one, because we'll never be able to be truly self-reliant. We'll always need, to an extent, to have one foot in the system, because obviously that's where the electricity mains are, where a lot of people's work is. Even the system itself, you need to be online to earn your money, do whatever it is you got to do. So there'll always be one foot in that, but the one foot outside of it, I personally believe it's going to become increasingly important to know people who know about the electricity coursing around your home, to know about the ins and outs of plumbing in an advanced fashion. Again, all of us can learn the basics, but there are certain problems, certain issues where you just can't. Who know about growing food, who know about building businesses online, who know how to build a house. I think all of these things are extremely important for the world that's coming, because it will somewhat insulate you and safeguard you, not to mention give you that added layer of safety that we just don't have. As I said before, I really woke up to this when I was living in London, round the corner from London Bridge. 2 major terror attacks while I was living there, major ones. One of my friends was running down the road, or had to run down the road because a girl was running towards her covered in blood saying there's a terror attack. That woke me up, and that made me see the system does not care. It will do all the sad tweets, and they might have a celebrity crying and all that sort of thing, but it gets forgotten. Well, I didn't forget, and I'm sure you didn't forget either. And I remember at that time I thought, they don't care. They will leave us like lambs to the slaughter. Now, again, I'm not saying take up arms or anything like that, because we know what the system is like. But I'm saying you have to make the plan to get away from these dangerous hotspots, to have people around you who you can trust. If there's some weirdo in your local town, the state isn't going to do anything. In fact, they put them there. So you have to have people around you who can keep an ear out for you. Don't go to X Park today. A group of good men. I often think this, when you see some weirdo in the park, where are all the men? You think we should be joining arms together. 4 or 5 of us could go up to 3 of these blokes and say, look, piss off. You're scaring the women, you're intimidating the children. That's what we should be doing, but we know what would happen in this day and age if you did it. You'd be spending a few nights at Her Majesty's pleasure, if not more, as well as being, tarred with opprobrium by the BBC and The Guardian. But the point is, we need to, I believe, start looking towards communities for the long-term future to keep each other and our families safe. That will be the future to my mind. Of course, this will be a big theme on the Substack in 2026 as well. Is already, really. On that note, I have a monthly call on the Substack, so do join if you want to come along to that. Obviously got big plans for 2026 and what I want to do there. Much stronger community. You can read all about it on the Substack. Also got the sister channel Sacred Way about personal and spiritual transformation. Do let me know your thoughts about this down below, and do subscribe to this channel if you're new. And take care out there, friends. Remember, we do need to stand by each other now more than ever. So, take care, everyone.